live from the U.S.-Mexico border. The Symposium at the Wall, Cartels, Trafficking, and Asylum.
Welcome back to the We Build the Wall Symposium. We are now beginning our afternoon set of speakers, I'm Chris Kobach, and it is my pleasure to announce the person who is going to announce our next speech. But the person I want to bring up to the stage next is advisory board of We Build the Wall. He is a critical part of the mission, and he is somebody that I think everyone, both here in the audience and back at home, is going to be quite familiar with if you are familiar with the immigration issue. And he was a member of Congress from 1998 to 2008, representing an area in the Denver suburbs, it would be a fair way to say it, in Colorado. And of course, he ran for president in 2008, and now you know who I'm talking about. I'm talking about Tom Tancredo, who is a real hero to the immigration enforcement movement. Tom not only ran for president and was the first presidential candidate ever to talk about illegal immigration and the crisis was already become in that election cycle, but he has been a fighter in Congress, was a fighter in Congress for a decade, the guy who carried the flag on trying to do something about the illegal immigration crisis. But beyond all of that, Tom Tancredo is a really, really good man. He is a wonderful person, and it has been just an incredible pleasure for me to spend time. Tom and I have been friends for better part of 2 decades, but it's been a great pleasure to have him and be on the same board with him and spend time with him again, because it reminds me of just what a great man he is. He's also a great shot. We've done some pheasant hunting together, and he knows how to knock down the ringnecks. But beyond all of that, he is a good friend, a great man, and a real fighter, a real patriot in this movement. And so it was with great pleasure that I introduced my good friend, Tom Tancredo.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chris. And indeed, it is an honor to be here, to be in the same company with Chris, with Steve, and all the other people on the board. You know, I have on this little T-shirt that some guy named Rush on the radio sells. And of course, it's to bring to the attention of the American public that there was this lady a couple hundred years ago whose work, whose life in many ways, and who for years after her actual, while she was a great hero to the revolution, for years people have known about her and talked about her, and in fact she has inspired many people, and that's of course Betsy Ross. Well, let me tell you, the lady that I am privileged to be here today to introduce, so inspired millions. She is a blogger, she's a political commentator, she's been on TV, she's an author, but mostly she inspires people on our side to fight for this wonderful place we call America. Now, you know, I often, every time I introduce her, I use a little story. I always say that when he first met the author of Uncle Tom's Cabin, Harriet Beecher Stowe, little tiny lady, he said to her, "So you're the little lady that started this great big war." Well, Michelle did not start the war that we are fighting today, the war that the liberals are fighting, the war that progressives are fighting against the America that you and I know and love. But I will tell you, all the biggest general in that war, and her efforts are vilified. She is continually criticized, of course, on the left, which tells you how great she really is. And I will also say, the other day I saw that for the first time ever in the Gallup poll, immigration has become the #1 issue for all people actually identifying an issue. First time ever. A reason for that, by the way, is because of this lady who is, I am absolutely so proud to say, has been a friend for many, many years. God bless her, and thank you for allowing her to be here today to address you. Michelle Malkin.
Thank you. Good afternoon here from the DIY wall. This is amazing. I'm so humbled to be here, humbled to be introduced by an immigration patriot and hero. Could you please stand and thank Tom Tancredo for his public service to this country? You know, this man was a deplorable before it was a thing, okay? And now, of course, you see so many young influencers out there who have joined the sovereignty movement, the patriot movement, who are being deplatformed. Well, Tom was deplatformed by none other than Karl Rove, who told him not to darken the White House door. You all remember that? If you don't know this history, especially for the young influencers in the audience, you need to know it. Because as tough as the fight is against the far leftists, the transnationalists, the open borders in the Democrat Party, it's been a hell of a fight against the corporatist amnesty shills in the establishment GOP in the Beltway. Tom was one of those early birds in the House GOP grassroots who was holding the establishment elites accountable. And he has always been, I heard the phrase, happy warrior. To be able to smile and to be able to have the decency and character and integrity and knowing that you're right in defending the country that we love. I am also honored to be here with my old friend Chris Kobach, another immigration patriot. I mean, I feel like we're the OGs, right? I feel old. And for the old people out there, OG, of course, original gangsta. But as Tom has said, even among us, you know, there are many who preceded us who had been carrying the message of America first, who suffered the slings and arrows of the same America haters out there, all the way back to Pat Buchanan, God bless him, who ran on an immigration platform. And for those of us who've made this a singular issue, the attack that it is a single issue is so laughable to me. It is the issue. It is the existential issue of the United States of America. And immigration is all issues. It's education, it's healthcare, it's welfare, it's national security, it's public safety, it's our civic culture, it's our survival. I called this a DIY project, and my heart has always been with the grassroots. I've never seen anything like this. It is historic. And of course, because it represents such a disruption to the open borders establishment on the left and the right, it's going to be under attack. So the fact that you're all here today and spreading the word about this miracle, this incredible monument to American sovereignty, give yourselves a hand. So God bless Brian and his family and the owners of this land and everybody who's involved in building this wall and protecting America. So I was supposed to do a PowerPoint presentation, but there's no power. I have the power of my mouth, though. And as I'm always joking, my little brown mouth. Although last week, I have to tell you, if those of you who are still on Twitter, and God knows how long it will be, TikTok, until we're all kicked off there, but we got to fight on every battleground until they push every last one of us off. Amen? Well, last week I had the double joy of being attacked by white liberals for not realizing, white progressive open borders liberals for not knowing that I'm white. Shocker, newsflash to me. And also being attacked by supporters of the squad, or as I call them, the Congressional Brat Pack, for being too white. I mean, these people can't. And that attack, that line of ad hominem against people of all colors, like the people here in this room, of all backgrounds, for believing in the American experiment and wanting to make sure that we protect the blessings of liberty for ourselves and our posterity. Gee, where did those words come from? As somehow the ones who are the haters, the ones who hate America, the ones who hate American values. I mean, if I had a dime for every time some leftist lectured to me about Emma Lazarus, apparently the founding mother of this country, I'd be a billionaire. The title of my talk that I wanted to focus on was Open Borders Churches, Human Traffickers Hiding Behind the Cross. And I think it is well past time to look at the funders who are sabotaging efforts like this, because this significant segment of wall will be able to block a significant number of people from coming in. But meanwhile, you've got sanctuary churches, the Vatican, and many religious organizations that are funded by your tax dollars, yours and mine, to undermine immigration law and to disrupt an orderly immigration system. Some of you may have read a column that I wrote 2 weeks ago about the Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Services. Raise your hand if you read it. I got 3 responses from Lutheran readers. Number 1, thank the Lord, you are finally exposing the open borders elites in our church. Please say it louder. Number 2, all Lutherans, we don't all agree with it. Why are you talking to me? Talk to them. They name themselves Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Services. I am just the messenger. And number 3, I had no idea. And the fact that we have so many people who are dedicated to the cause of American sovereignty, who have no clue that they are funding these open borders agencies, is alarming. This is the subject of my 7th book, which is coming out in September, called Open Borders, Inc. Who's Funding the Destruction of America? Simply asking the question will invite an attack that I hate immigrants. I don't hate my parents. They were naturalized immigrants to this country. I don't hate immigrants who love this country. I don't hate immigrants who respect the rule of law. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. We will all end up on the Southern Poverty Law Center hate list. Yes! I was one of the OGs of the hate list as it was first developed in 2006 and 2007. And what irritated and annoyed and aggravated, I know the word, triggered. What triggered the SPLC was my criticism of the Asylum movement. You're not supposed to say that word. That's a hate word. Even though there's a plan in place, there are academic studies on it, people on their T-shirts when they're calling to abolish ICE, but that's what got me on the list. And it's the redefining of exposing the ideological roots and the funding of open borders as hate, where you can draw a clear line between what La Raza and SPLC and many of these left-wing evangelical Christian groups and Catholic elites did back then, straight to 2019, where we have patriots like Marianne Mendoza, who gets booted off of Twitter for upholding the legacy of her loved one and supporting immigration enforcement in this country. It's disgraceful what's happening, and we all need to speak up and unite about it. My warning to you is that it's horrible enough that hard-earned money of law-abiding churchgoers of all denominations is subsidizing what is in essence a global human trafficking racket masquerading as Christian charity around the world. Even worse, as I mentioned, is that billions of American tax dollars are going to religious organizations and agencies that pervert Scripture to line their pockets in the name of the Lord and social justice. My warning to you is that anarchists come in all shapes and sizes. Antifa anarchists wear black hoods and carbon fiber knuckle tactical gloves. Well, sanctuary anarchists wear black robes and white clergy collars. Like Antifa, church leaders who brazenly sponsor, harbor, and induce illegal aliens to violate our borders are dangerous disruptors, dividers, aiders, and abettors of lawlessness. We've seen calls now on Capitol Hill to prosecute Antifa. We should prosecute sanctuary anarchists who are doing every bit as much damage as Antifa is on the streets and in the pulpits. Let me say this for the record. I was baptized in the Catholic Church. I was confirmed. I was married in my hometown parish, St. Elizabeth Ann Seton in Absecon, New Jersey. Shout out to all of you Jersey people. I served as an organist at my church as I was attending Holy Spirit High School. My daughter, who's in the audience, was named after Saint Veronica, who's the patron saint of my parents' village in the Philippines, who is a Catholic model of individual compassion and courage. I am not anti-Catholic. I am anti-open borders Catholics. Let me give you some numbers. The annual parish income of the church neared $12 billion last year. The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, total annual revenues, gains, and other support, $274 million. $72 million of that was our money, government contracts and grant revenues for them to undermine our borders and undermine America. The estimated total government refugee resettlement revenue that the Catholic Bishops' Conference got in 2008 through 2017, $534.7 million. A key player in the vast illegal alien lawyers lobby, the illegal alien lawyers lobby, you've seen, right, in the last several months, all of the Know Your Rights clinics that are being held for them all across the country. The Catholic Legal Immigration Network, annual budget nearly $13 million. Catholic Relief Services, which carries out open borders activities, $1 billion in their budget for 2017. Nearly $4 billion in 2016. Revenue from government sources took up $1.2 billion. And then there is the obscure but very important Catholic Campaign for Human Development, whose annual budget last year was $18 million. As immigration hawks, we are all very, very familiar with the pro-illegal, alien, anti-Trump radicals in the USCCB. I want to focus now more on the CCHD because it happens to be their 50th anniversary year of their organization. They serve as the bishop's social justice grant-making arm. So ostensibly, it is an anti-poverty program. And one of my slides shows their graphic. Their domain name is povertyusa.org, but in practice, it is a political radicalization and left-wing agitator recruitment program. Guess how it's funded? Largely by people who are unaware that when they contribute to the national collection that's taken up by the Catholic Church every Sunday before Thanksgiving, that goes to CCHD. 75% of that goes to the bishops, and the diocese retain a tiny 25% of it. Let me tell you a little bit about the history of this organization. As many of you may know, Barack Obama cut his teeth. That's okay. Yes, you're allowed to do that here. It's a safe space. He cut his teeth at the intersection of the Catholic Church and the Alinsky world. He ran a CCHD-funded outfit called Developing Communities Project from an office inside the Holy Rosary Church of Chicago. "Well, I got my start as a community organizer working with mostly Catholic parishes," he told the Catholic Digest, "on the south side of Chicago that were struggling because steel plants were closed. The Campaign for Human Development helped fund the project, and so very early on, my career was intertwined with the belief in social justice that is so strong in the church." CCHD funded the Alinsky Acolytes at Acorn to the tune of $7.3 million over 10 years. And in fact, CHD was a project of a Chicago bishop and Saul Alinsky himself, who wanted to ensure funding for different organizations that were organized under an umbrella organization called the International Federation, Arts Federation. A half century after its founding, this organization currently funds, and this will sound very familiar to you all in many contexts, restorative justice efforts in the public schools to chip away at effective discipline for disruptive students. That's the program that was in place in Parkland that allowed the shooter to get away with so many things with never being disciplined. Environmental justice campaigns for green jobs, and a social justice league at St. Mary's University that welcomes illegal alien dreamers to campus and sells T-shirts to fund DACA applications. During the Bush amnesty battles, and you can boo at Bush if you want to. And if I throw in Ghost of John McCain, I know everyone will go nuts again. CHD collaborated with Clinic, the lawyers' arm of the bishops, and they have spent upwards of $3.5 million to promote amnesty within parishes and to propagandize Catholic members. In 2016, after Trump was elected, the CHD issued strategic national grants of $500,000 to the pro-dreamer Hope Border Institute, which is just a stone throws away in El Paso, Texas. Another $500,000 went to the Pico National Network to provide more training for pastors and parishioners to brainwash them in the open borders agenda. And I haven't even started on the Pope yet. The Vatican brass have actively subverted our sovereignty through their support of a sprawling shelter operation that entices illegal aliens, family members, the ones we, of course, all care about as fellow human beings, to drag themselves and their children across Central America, through Mexico, and into the U.S. If I had my PowerPoint, I would show you the maps that are readily available on the internet. They've got little beds, right? It's like the Yelp and TripAdvisor illegal alien bed and breakfast network, and it's subsidized by our tax dollars and Catholic collection plate contributions. The Vatican itself had donated hundreds of thousands of dollars to shelters from Guatemala and Mexico that are run by every sect of the Catholic Church, the Scalabrinians, the Jesuits, you name it. We can actively resist. There's a lot that ordinary Americans can do from their pews, in their neighborhoods, at home. And if I had a Catholic donation envelope, I would burn it right now. I would tear it up and rip it. Because if you feed the beast will destroy us. Who's funding America's destruction? It is hard, it's very difficult to stand up and call out the church that I grew up in. And it's just one of many. Because whether it's Catholics or Lutherans or the Hebrew Aid Society, which is another of the voluntary agencies that gets millions, tens of millions of dollars to resettle refugees largely from Islamic Sharia enforcing countries, whatever the denomination is, if we do not call them out, if we do not expose the funding, if we do not defund them, and if we don't prosecute them, this country does not have a prayer. Can I get an amen? I'll be passing out cards about the book, but more importantly, I think you hear a lot about the need for unity. And I want to say one last thing about this intense multi-part war that's going on. It's going on in the White House. It's going on within the White House. It's going on between the White House and the GOP Chamber of Commerce establishment that doesn't care about American citizens, American workers, and law-abiding naturalized Americans, let alone people who are waiting in line to do it the right way outside of our country. They don't care about them. They care about lining their pockets. They care about securing power. They care about ensuring a permanent ruling majority for a majority minority country. Now, when we say it, it's hateful, but when they gloat about it, it's okay. Our platforms are disappearing by the second. When I started out as, yes, just a blogger 15, 16, 17 years ago, I never imagined there'd be a time when I'd wake up one day knowing how easy it was for anyone to simply plant a flag and say whatever you wanted to say and worry about the idea that your entire platform would be unplugged because you defended America. Well, a friend of mine, someone you may know, because she's done amazing work for our country, Ann Corcoran of Refugee Resettlement Watch, had her entire archive removed by the Silicon Valley overlords at WordPress because it was deemed hate speech. Every time a voice is silenced, it is incumbent upon you to redouble your voice and scream louder and be in the public spaces to enforce our immigration laws, for us to live the oath of naturalization that my parents took to defend our country against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. God bless the Symposium at the Wall.
Can you do some Q&A?
Yeah, absolutely.
What a great speech. Michelle has agreed to do some question and answers, so if any of you have any questions, you can come up to the microphones there. We'll do it for a little while, but I get the prerogative of asking the first question. Michelle, you and I have had some great conversations over the years, and I've always loved your insight on the media, specifically the cable news media, and who's on our side, who's not on our side. And one thing I've noticed, which you and I haven't talked about, is how CNN, since the election of Donald Trump, went from being sort of okay sometimes to just now rabid communist news network and complete fake news. I'd just love to hear your thoughts on that and how you think Fox News is doing for us, and just generally, you've got some of the best insights on the media. Tell us a little more.
Having served in the cable news swamp for upwards of 2 decades, the one thing I will say is that it's important, especially for young influencers, to remember that there was a time when there were no alternatives, when the only thing that you could do to find anyone who voiced your values and principles and fealty to the Constitution and our history was Rush Limbaugh. That was it. In newspapers, there were a handful of columnists, and I've been privileged to write for Creators Syndicate since 1999. But with the proliferation of cable news, I think what's happened with the old guard, well, of course, good riddance to the ABC, NBC, CBS alphabet soups, right? They're a joke. But with regard to CNN, yes, they've become completely unhinged, which is the title of my book from 2006. And the reason it's so valuable to have any kind of space in alternative media and to think ahead about what's next in a post-Twitter, post-Facebook world. I don't care if it's Parler or Telegram or Signal or BitChute, Brave, DuckDuckGo, all of the alternatives. It's important to be able to respond immediately to lies. And the biggest lies under the Trump administration that have been told have been open borders lies. The iconic image that was printed on the Time magazine cover of the crying girl who was supposedly separated from her mother, but who was not separated, but in fact was involuntarily separated from her father, who didn't know that the mother was dragging her across the border, right? or all the fake pictures of the Obama cages from 2014 that the Democrats didn't care about, that Alyssa Milano didn't care about, that George Clooney didn't care about, that are being recycled and labeled as having occurred under the Trump administration. Now we've got these abolish ICE protests that are dutifully propagandized on the likes of CNN and MSNBC against places like Fort Sill or military bases that were housing illegal alien children back in 2014. But again, what was the stance of the Democratic Party then? La, 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 I can't hear you, do not know what you're talking about. And those kinds of hypocrisies have to be exposed over and over again. These people are not journalists. Journalists is what I call the journalists, right? They're credentialed like the Sorbonne. And I think it's the rise of citizen journalism, and I pay tribute to all of the young people out there with a cell phone camera now, just doing the job that the so-called mainstream journalists, political operatives won't do. That is the future.
Thank you. And we have a question from the audience now. Go ahead.
Hello, Michelle. My name is Mary Yoli Moore. I am with Christian Television, KSE Channel 38. I am the press relations and press officer. My question and suggestion. My question is, have you visited with Eternal Word Television Network, EWTN, Raymond Arroyo? And I would love to see you meet Raymond Arroyo out of Washington, D.C. He has been criticized. He's Catholic. It's a Catholic organization television network. He has indirectly been criticizing the Pope, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Listening to you was almost like listening to him. I would love to see you on his Washington, D.C. Eternal Word Television Network and be a guest. He's also been with Laura Ingraham on the Ingraham Angle. And so I would love to ask you, would you please do me a favor and try to get on Eternal Word Television world over Raymond Arroyo, because you are the missing link to that issue, and they will welcome you 100%.
I hope so, and I'd be glad to do it. Glad to spread the gospel.
Amen.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
And then one last question I'll ask you, Michelle. You have been, as Tom said, one of the original fighters, the original gangsters on this issue. Why don't you just share with the audience how you first got so interested? I remember you and I first met when I was at the Justice Department almost 20 years ago, and I was John Ashcroft's chief advisor on immigration law at the time, back when there wasn't DHS. It was just Justice Department and then INS. And you were already so well informed and so fired up on the issue, and I was amazed. So you had obviously been educating yourself. How did you get started on the immigration issue, and what fuels your fire on this?
Well, it started when I was a child. My maternal grandfather came for a visit with my maternal grandmother to see the Statue of Liberty, and he had fought for the Philippine Scouts during World War II and survived the Bataan Death March. From the time I was old enough to understand, my parents enforced to me, and for a lot of people this is a platitude, and I hear it over and over again, but for me it is a lived experience, that entry into this country and citizenship in this country is a privilege, and privilege is not a pejorative. It is not a right, and it's not an entitlement. And I started out my newspaper career, if some of you are from nearby California, at the Los Angeles Daily News. And back then, my ear was to the ground of the grassroots. If any of you are veterans of the Save Our State initiative, it really was the opening salvo in the grassroots battle against the elites on immigration enforcement. And I took the lessons that I learned there up to the Pacific Northwest, the crazy, anarchic Pacific Northwest, learned from Border Patrol and ICE about the problems on the northern border. And as many of you know me, it culminated after the 9/11 attacks in my first book called Invasion, the name borrowed from Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution, which too many people in Washington have forgotten, the role and duty of the federal government to protect the states against invasion. So Open Borders, Inc., which is coming out in September, is really the final in a trilogy for me. It's like my Star Wars trilogy, okay? Invasion, Sold Out, which talked about the economic impact of mass immigration and the role that pipelines like H-1B expansion have played in sabotaging American tech workers at the expense of corporate interests and lobbyists. And now Open Borders, Inc., which collects the dots and connects the dots on who's funding America's destruction. We have to stop it.
Thank you so much, Michelle. We're going to take a 5-minute break now, and we will resume our program in that period of time. So feel free to take a break.
The Symposium at the Wall, sponsored by We Build the Wall, Numbers USA, Citizens of the American Republic, Black Americans for a Better Future, Angel Families, Citizens United, and Human Events. We'll return to the Symposium at the Wall after this short break.
I started looking into this issue of immigration and becoming concerned about it well over now 40 years. I've been to this border dozens of times. I have looked at the problem from every angle, and I think to myself, if this isn't the time to do it, then it never will be. So it's time for American people to get together and help us build this wall. On the growing phenomena of illegal aliens, what has become an increasingly costly burden to the United States taxpayer.
I came into Congress in 1998 with this issue. It was my signature issue for being in Congress. I thought there would be other members, at least of my own caucus, the Republicans, that would be supportive. I couldn't get members of Congress on my own side to listen for 5 minutes to any discussion we ever had about this issue. They would shy away from it, and literally, when I'm walking down the hall, they would like move to the other side and think, he's going to ask me about immigration.
I have tried everything I can think of to bring to the attention of the American public, including running for the Republican nomination for president. But I ran for one reason, and that was to force this issue to be discussed by the other guys on that stage. Most people in America want secure borders. Most people in America want actually the rule of law to be established. And you say, well, how is it that for all these years, we've never gotten that, even when most Americans really do want it? An old adage in politics, follow the money. We are heading from Cincinnati to Detroit, Michigan. Why we're going to Cincinnati or Detroit? Every state's a border state. Every state is affected by massive illegal immigration. But nothing I have done gives you the sense of satisfaction as we progress to that actual turning the first shovel of dirt. There are two problems in Congress trying to deal with this issue. One's the Democrat Party that sees massive immigration, both legal and illegal, as a source of voters. The other problem is the Republican Party, which looks at immigration, both legal and illegal, as a source of money. Brian Terry was a Border Patrol agent who was killed here on the border by cartel members who were smuggling guns. We can remember him in the most honorable way by taking up the challenge and completing a border fence along the areas here that are heavily trafficked by both cartel members and illegal aliens. That's the best way to memorialize Brian Terry. Borders are important. Border walls are important. Some sort of barrier. The people that are coming into this country, you've got to know who they are, why they're coming, for what purpose, how long they're going to be here. That's called immigration. And that is a process that every country uses because it's part of national sovereignty. Having private citizens acting when the government can't or won't is something America really has as a tradition. If the government can't or won't build some sort of barrier to establish what sovereignty really means for a nation, then the people have to. And that's why we're here.
This is a show of hands question, and hold them up for a moment so people can see. Raise your hand if your government plan would provide coverage for undocumented immigrants.
The drug cartels are controlling who crosses the border. They make a lot of money smuggling drugs. They make a lot of money smuggling people.
Right. She voted twice against bills that would have provided more resources for these migrants in these facilities, and then she goes down to the facility and say they're not getting the right resources.
The cartel and crime gangs across Latin America and beyond are focused on getting people and drugs to the United States.
We return to the Symposium at the Wall, Cartels, Trafficking, and Asylum.
Hello, everybody. How's everyone doing tonight? Good. My name is Emma. I go by the name The Conservative Latina on all my social media platforms. Yes, I'm a Latina conservative Trump supporter. I am so thankful to be a part of this amazing event with a wonderful group of patriots. I'm an immigrant that came here legally from Lima, Peru, and became a U.S. citizen in 2015. I love what this president is doing and for this country, and I will stand by him all the way to 2020. He has my vote. Our next speaker is an immigrant that came here legally from India 50 years ago, achieved the American dream, and has become an asset to this great country and to the conservative movement. This wonderful man is a business manufacturer for AVG, which produces electronic products. He is the one and only few manufacturers in the United States which has provided and continue to provide more jobs for American citizens. His name is Shali Kumar. Interesting fact about President Trump. In 2016, President Trump adopted the Hindu community and spoke to Hindu Americans in their language during his campaign, which helped turn the vote in 2016 from Democratic to Republican. Over 1 million Hindu voters switched parties. How awesome is that? The man behind the Hindu movement is this man right here, Shali Kumar. He is part of the Hindu movement for Trump, organized by the Republican Hindu Coalition. If you haven't looked them up, you better do so right now. Or when you get home. It's my pleasure to introduce to you this amazing immigrant that makes America great again. Shali Kumar.
Good afternoon. Could we get some of the people in the back just take their seats? Thank you. Thank you, Emma. Delighted to be here once again. If we can look at the wall, if we can project out the wall. So you have a beautiful Emma and you have a beautiful wall. How is that? Isn't that great? Some of you might remember me from the last time as a crazy guy in a dark suit and a red tie, regardless of the heat and the temperature. But when you are surrounded by this great crowd, particularly my favorites, Chris Bannon, where are you? Jack and Sean and Darren Beatty, and so many beautiful people. Who cares about the heat? Let's give this crowd, yourself, and the people I mentioned, and I have some new friends, by the way, John Moran, a new friend. Lots of new friends I got from here. So let's give them and you a big round of applause. My fellow Americans, good afternoon, brothers and sisters, sons and daughters and grandchildren, particularly the youngsters in this crowd and all over the United States of America. I'm going to be talking about a very serious subject. Future of American civilization as we know it depends on what we do with immigration into our country. I am going to be talking about the morality of legal immigration, particularly merit-based immigration as desired by our great President Donald J. Trump. And also the immorality, you heard me right, the immorality of illegal crossing our border at will without proper authorization and documents. There are those, particularly in the mainstream media, who have framed this issue of illegal border crossing in terms of morality on their side. But they're wrong, just plain wrong. Let's take an example. Let's say you are in a new city, a new neighborhood. You are taking a stroll with your family and you get on a street with beautiful homes. Do you tell your children, oh, this is a beautiful home, let's just barge in and live there? And in fact, if there is a little fence there, you can tell them to jump the fence. Would you be teaching your 5-year-old that it is your right to do just that? Go ahead, jump, and let me help you get across. Who is moral here and who's immoral? I'm sure no right person in their mind, unless you were raised in a culture of what's mine is mine and what's yours is mine. There are cultures out there who have that philosophy as well. But for the most part, you are not going to teach your children that this is a moral thing to do. Country is a collection of families, neighborhoods, towns, and states. It is just like a collective home. Consider this to be a giant family home. Nobody on the left, center, or right would want to teach their children that barging in somebody else's home without an invitation is moral, right? If we teach our future generations this new moral, supposedly, this, in my mind, is the end of the American experiment, the American civilization. We need to get this narrative under control. Mahatma Gandhi once told his granddaughter, whenever you are in doubt, remember that the ways of truth will always prevail. Always. So I have full confidence that eventually on this issue of illegal border crossing, truth will prevail and the countries would do the right thing. Now, they may need a little bit of Trump persuasion to do that, but they will come along. Now, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I am Shalabh Kumar, as Emma said, and my Twitter handle is I am Shalabh Kumar, which will be pretty hard for you to remember, but you could always Google Shali Kumar, S-H-A-L-L-I Kumar, Twitter, and you could get to me. Now, looking at me, you could tell that I am not a recipient of white privilege. Yes, I was born in India in a poor family, so much so that we were rationed 8 ounces of milk per week per child. But we studied hard, worked hard, and got through college with scholarships. I came to this country in 1969 with $5,000 in debt. I came as a student and then applied for the green card to get legal status. I had to prove that I'm a good engineer. The country needs me. I will make good, solid contribution to the economy of the country. U.S. Labor Department had to certify that I invented a lot of products, more than 1,000, created many new industries, got more than 20 new patents, created thousands of new jobs, and then the citizens of this magnificent country awarded me with citizenship. In fact, the day I got my citizenship with an award from the citizens of Chicago for being the most outstanding citizen of Chicago was and is one of the single biggest achievements of my life. So my fellow Americans, whereas my Janam Bhumi, that is the land of my birth, was India or Bharat in Hindi, my Karam Bhumi, that is the land of my karma, that is actions, is the United States of America. A land that had the ultimate blessings from God to bring 7 founding fathers of America on the same land at the same time, who created an unparalleled system of government of free people that became the sole superpower on this earth. How is that? That is a blessing from God. But we want to keep it this way and not turn it over to China and some others. That's another matter I could talk for hours, but we want to remain the sole superpower and the most benevolent superpower. We never attack anybody, very peaceful, so we need to remain and exercise that all over the world. That is my journey, but consider this. When I was 18 years old and thought of coming to the United States for further studies, I was told that America is like heaven. See, this is when I was a young boy, that America is a heaven. Golden people with streets paved with gold. In Hindi, we call it Swarga. Ability to come to this country, to do graduate studies, raise a family, pursue my profession in engineering was not my right. It was a gift I had to earn. Nobody should ever consider entry into the United States, working here, get a green card, and then citizenship to be your right. It's a gift from the citizens of the United States to you. If you do consider that to be your right, it is not only wrong, it is immoral. Let's take this issue of illegal border crossing in terms of development of a civilized society. From the time of cavemen to formation of family, to formation of small groups, to formation of villages, states, and nations. That is where laws came in. Otherwise, we will be living under the laws of jungle. That is where the laws of immigration came from. Further, let us take this issue in terms of our religious and spiritual teachings. I'm a devout Hindu, and there is plenty of literature written on this subject that I will cite in more detail later, but let's go to 10 Commandments. God, in the Western religions, in Exodus 20.117 or 17, the 10th commandment says, "Thou shalt not covet your neighbor's house." Isn't barging into somebody's home, somebody's house, a violation of the 10th commandment? Now, I would like to take, right from this platform, take on Don Lemon and Chris Cuomo to explain that to me. Now, same Don Lemon and Chris Cuomo would like to argue that these poor people crossing our borders illegally are victims of oppression in their countries, that we have a long tradition of welcoming all such victims, giving them hope to make a better life for them. Some are physically oppressed and fear for their lives. They need asylum. My answer to them is this. Please note this fact. Do you think there is some kind of an oppression in Punjab, the state where I come from? I was born and raised in Punjab, India. Why is it that just in the last 2 years, the number of apprehension of Punjabis at the southern border has increased from under 100 to now a whopping 8,000? I'll tell you why. It's simple economics. Simple economics. The cost of just an entry into the United States for a well-Punjabi farmer is $100,000. If coyotes can take you for $50,000, they'll come here. So that's what's happening. There is no oppression. India is a democracy. It's a very peaceful country. There is no oppression here, but they are taught when you come across here, say there's oppression and I'm coming here for asylum. Now, I know a lot about Mexico, but I don't really know a whole lot about other countries in South America, like Honduras and some other Guatemala and so forth. If they do have a problem of oppression in their country, then what they should do is do the right legal thing. Go to their embassies and apply. Go there and apply, and if you are accepted, you are accepted. If you're not accepted, you are not accepted. But that is what the procedure should be. Besides the morality issue, our open border without walls presents another threat to the citizens of our country, a very serious national security threat. Like I told you, I was born and raised in India. Now, note this, please. If you look at the map of India, on the north side, there is Himalayas. That's a natural mountainous border. On the two sides, there is ocean. So there are natural walls. But there was a hole in the wall called Khyber Pass in the mountains. As a result of that hole in the wall, the Hindu nation had to suffer 800 years of slavery at the hands of Mongols. So you need to pay attention and learn from history. Another point, I don't know whether somebody has pointed out, President Trump says it costs $275 billion a year to support illegal Americans in the country. Now, NBC says 54. Let's take the middle, 164 million. Just look at what all can be done with 164 billion a year. You could buy 2,000 F-35 airplanes with that. You could build 2,000 miles of highways every year with that. Lastly, my fellow Americans, this is not a moment too soon. Just like the 7 founding fathers, God gave us President Trump. I call him Reagan on steroids. More than 3% of GDP growth year after year, lowest unemployment, highest stock market in history, better and better trade deals with other countries to bring manufacturing back into a country, and restoration of our prestige around the world, where our friends and adversary both have begun to respect us. Again, this election in 2016 represents the moment that the American people stood up and took their country back. The moment the American people said, enough with career bureaucrats and lifelong politicians, let's elect somebody who actually knows how to get these things done. The moment cannot be underestimated. When President Trump, we have arrived at an unprecedented juncture. The moment won't last. This is a moment when we take our country back. This is a moment we support our president. This is a moment we fix our immigration system. And lastly, this is a moment we build the wall. Thank you, and God bless America.
The Symposium at the Wall, sponsored by We Build the Wall, Numbers USA, Citizens of the American Republic, Black Americans for a Better Future, Angel Families, Citizens United, and Human Events. We'll return to the Symposium at the Wall after this short break.
Democrats bury their heads in the sand, close their eyes, and pretend that America's borders are totally safe and secure. They are not.
A river of humanity is surging northward tonight.
And President Trump has had just about enough.
We have the dumbest immigration laws in the world.
He just signed his first veto.
Is the only man who's going to save our country.
35,000 violations of the law, including 4,000 homicides.
33 people actually called 911. Their calls captured right here.
911, what is your emergency?
He was killed by that wrong-way driver. He was just 32 years old.
She knew her son had a dangerous job, and yet he was killed off the clock.
There's somebody driving on the wrong side of the road.
Leaders rallied with angel moms to show their support.
Calling for an end to broken border policies.
We have pleaded with these politicians to do something to protect American citizens when they're stepping over dead American bodies in their rush to protect illegal alien criminals. Brandon was an incredible human being. He just lit up a room when he would walk in. Everybody loved him. It was May 12th, 2014. He was driving home from work. He was on an off-ramp. This man was coming the wrong way on that same ramp and hit my son head on. The minute we drove up and I saw all the police cars, I knew it wasn't good. And probably about 5 or 10 minutes after me arriving there, my son passed away. I started Googling this man's name who killed my son and started finding out more about him. Because the media really doesn't cover when they're illegals. That really wasn't a topic of the articles or newscasts or anything, really.
15 DPS officers working to track down this wrong-way driver.
He was 3 times the legal limit drunk. He was high on meth. So I started researching it and found out that he had been convicted of crimes in 1994 up in Colorado. And they dismissed assault, burglary, leaving the scene of an accident, but he spent no jail time whatsoever, was just released to go back out and do it again.
If we had an effective barrier across the southern border, a huge number could have been prevented because these illegal aliens are coming in, they're just walking in freely with nothing stopping them.
What will happen if the wall isn't built? We're already spending $136 billion a year supporting illegal aliens in our country, and that number is going to continue growing and be a burden on American taxpayers until the wall is built.
We have a president that's willing to make that message across this nation and have that fight.
Angel parents, very important people to me.
Angel families come forward to tell their stories, not because we've created a manufactured crisis, but because we want to tell the American people and share with you our heartache and let you know what is happening on our doorsteps, what's happening to your neighbors, what's happening to your fellow Americans. There is a way to prevent this, and it's not by continually lying to you and telling you that there isn't a problem. There is a problem. It's a national emergency, and thank you.
Thank you.
I want to help. I want to be a force in all of this, to know that I've made a difference in our country for us. And I'm doing this for his honor, because he would have done this for somebody else had it happened to them.
Let's make some noise so the people at home can hear you.
700,000 illegals came into the country illegally.
The most significant, the most important public policy decision we could deal with.
Over 4,000 a year are killed by illegal aliens. We are heading from our wonderful town hall that we had last night for We Build the Wall, and we are heading to Detroit, and we're going to have another town hall tomorrow night, and really looking forward to it. I mean, I think the American people are very excited to hear what we have to say and how we, the American people, are going to make something happen at our border that our politicians are failing to do.
It was an honor to be asked to join the advisory board with We Build the Wall and be in their presence and fight alongside them. Let my son still have a voice and protect the people of America.
My daughter, Tiffany, my only daughter, was my best friend. Right on the corner waiting for her were the Mexican drugs and the fentanyl that killed her. We lose 70,000 people a year. That's just to the illegal drugs. These aren't throwaway people. These are people's children, their brothers, their sisters, their mothers.
The fact that there was another angel mom told us about her daughter dying from an opioid overdose, which it resonates with me. I know what that the mother is going through, losing a child, but just the energy that was there and the thirst for knowledge that these people had. It's an amazing team that we have put together. People are really starting to realize this is a national emergency our president is telling us. And with each town hall that we do, I think it's going to be gaining more and more momentum. I'm so proud to be a part of this team that Brian's been able to pull together. It's people with many talents, people who know what they're doing, and we are going to do what the politicians in D.C. have failed to do, and that's to protect American people. So go, donate, do everything you need to do to become a part of this incredible movement.
We return to the Symposium at the Wall, Cartels, Trafficking, and Asylum.
My name is John Fredericks. I'm a syndicated radio talk show host based in Washington, D.C. I'm in the swamp. It's great to be here in New Mexico, El Paso. You know, for those of us that live in Washington, D.C., you probably don't know this, but our city is infested with rats. Not only the four-legged version, we got the two-legged version as well. We can't seem to get rid of them. It's good to have you here. I was the first media personality in America to endorse President Trump. It was in 2015 when he came down the escalator. And I'll never forget that day. As many of you remember, one of the things he said is, elect me president, and I'm going to build a big, beautiful wall. Well, Mr. President, here it is right here. You got it. And you know who paid for it? You did. We did. The way it was meant to be. I want to thank the visionary leadership of Brian Kolfage for this endeavor. Give him a big hand. Chris Kobach, who has been fighting this battle, been a lonely battle for him for 20 years. Chris, fabulous job. Our chairman, Steve Bannon, who was with us somewhere. I've been married 30 years, and I'm married to a very tough lady. She's only cried one time in 30 years, and that's when Steve Bannon left the White House. That shows you where I rate. Hey, we got a great panel today, and all-star panel, and our panel is called Every Town is a Border Town. the impact of illegal immigration on American cities. And our panelists today lead off. All of them have been on my radio show multiple times, especially my good buddy. Unfortunately, he's a Cubs fan. We'll kind of give him that for now. I'm an Astro fan, so we fight about that. America's Sheriff David Clark. Sheriff, give him a hand. From Milwaukee County, fabulous guy. Also, we have one of our angel dads, Steve Ronnebeck, who lost his son.
Thank you.
Steve, thank you. Who tragically lost his son at the hands of an illegal immigrant gang member. When all the hoopla about this wall is said and done, it's really about the angel moms and dads who can't go back. And so, Steve, thanks for being with us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Also, former congressman, former mayor of Hazleton, Pennsylvania, former candidate, a lot of formers in there, former candidate for U.S. Senate in Pennsylvania, former baseball pitcher, had a good arm, Lou Barletta. Lou, thanks for being with us. Lou led the fight in Hazleton against illegal immigrants when nobody even knew what the issue was. I remember having him on my show 9 years ago. Somebody said, you got to get this mayor on, and like, mayor who, from where, doing what? And what a prophet he has been. So Lou, thanks for being with us. We also have our angel mom here, Marianne Mendoza. Who tragically lost her child, Sergeant Brendan Mendoza, killed in a car crash by an intoxicated illegal alien that was deported multiple times and came back. Just a horrible story. And then the other day, you can't even say this without getting upset. Then the other day, Marianne gets banned from Twitter for posting about illegal immigration policies. It's unbelievable what we're faced today. So it's you that are changing it. And I'm going to start the panel with America's Sheriff, former Sheriff of Milwaukee County, Wisconsin, Sheriff David Clark.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, John. Good afternoon. It's good to see all of you. Many of you were here the last time I was here. I'm getting used to coming to El Paso. Starting to like it. I want to thank you for enduring. We're inside this tent that acts like a pressure cooker, keeps the heat in. So I know what you're dealing with. We're just as hot up here, by the way. We don't get any cool breezes up here. But thanks for being here today, because without your support, without your help, we can't keep the focus on what I believe is America's most urgent crisis, and it's illegal immigration. Now, there are three reasons. Bear with me. I'm going to paint a small picture for you. There are three reasons why we need a secure U.S.-Mexican border. For America, that is. The first is because there are national and domestic security issues. The second reason is to prevent the spread of infectious diseases. And the third reason is to control the influx of another country's ne'er-do-wells. Yes, I said ne'er-do-wells. That's the one that gets the left's undies in a bundle. All right? Now, quickly. Headline, number one, domestic and national security issues. Border Patrol agents intercept over $2 million worth of meth. Headline, Washington Examiner. Drugs pour in from Mexico border as Border Patrol forced to focus on immigrants. Number two, the spread of infectious diseases. Headline, Center for Immigration Studies, infectious disease making border crisis worse. The story points out that measles and mumps are being brought into the United States by illegal aliens. Headline, Conservative Review, 550 African migrants were just caught in Texas. DHS head says that they aren't being screened for Ebola. The story goes on to point out that the lion's share were from the Democratic Republic of Congo, the country with the worst Ebola outbreak in the world. Now let's go to number three. And that's the one I said you have to control the influx of another country's ne'er-do-wells. Headline Washington Times, the real cost of illegal immigration, and it's not avocados. The story points out that the cost to American taxpayers is around $2 billion. I said $2 billion a year in illegal immigration costs. And the way that thing's broken down, you know this. You have to educate their kids. That falls on the local taxpayer. All right? You have to give them health care, all these other amenities that kick in automatically. It is a lot cheaper, ladies and gentlemen, and I realize I'm preaching to the choir here. It is a lot cheaper to fortify the southern border than it is to deal with this cost, $200 billion a year. The president only asked for $4.5 billion to help secure the wall. They wouldn't even give him that. But that's the kind of way they add things up in Washington, D.C. John talked about that. I'll get into some of these other things as this panel goes on. But again, thanks for being here today.
Thank you, Sheriff. Steve Renovic.
So I don't know if many of you know the story about Grant. January 22nd, 2015, Grant was working the overnight shift at a QT in Mesa. An illegal alien came in and wanted to buy cigarettes. He dumped a jar of change out on the counter. Grant went to start counting the change. This man said, "What, you're not going to give me my cigarettes?" And Grant says, "Well, I got to count your change." This man pulled a gun. Grant did everything he was supposed to do and everything he was taught to do. He didn't say a word. He just handed over the cigarettes. And as soon as he did, this illegal alien shot my son point blank in the face. He left him for dead. Actually, before he did that, he walked over Grant's body, grabbed a couple more packs of cigarettes, and walked out the door. These are stories that we're hearing every day. 6 days ago, there was an illegal alien in Des Moines, Iowa, been twice deported, slaughtered a family. A woman and her 2 children. One of the children was 10, one of the children was 5. Slaughtered the family. And these are stories that they're not going away, folks. This invasion that's coming across our border, the reason that you built this wall and had Brian Colfage and the rest of us on the advisory board build this wall is because you want to be safe. The Democrats don't want you to be safe. The Democrats have done everything that they can to make our Border Patrol officers, our law enforcement officers, prisoners in their own uniforms. They can't ask if you're an illegal. They can't single you out. They can't ask for proper ID because, well, you're a racist. AOC came out the other day in the New York Times. If you're not for open borders, you must be a racist and you must be a Nazi. This is the rhetoric that everybody needs to hear that's coming out of the left. They accuse us, they accuse Sheriff Clark, Mary Ann, Lou, they accuse me of hate speech. We're up here just telling the truth. There's nothing hateful about it. We're just giving you facts and figures. We're giving you true statistics. One of them I'm going to give you right now. The amount of heroin that's coming across our southern border is causing 70,000 overdoses every year in our country. 70,000. These things are not going away. We need more of this wall, and we need it as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ron. Congressman Lou Barletta.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. This is like the last thing that I thought I was going to be doing in my life. I was elected mayor of Hazleton, which is a small town, maybe about 25,000 people up in northeastern Pennsylvania, 2,000 miles away from the nearest southern border. So it wasn't a town that you would ever expect to have an illegal immigration problem. When I was elected mayor in 2000, for example, in the Hazleton area school district, our English as the second language budget was $500. 5 years later, it was $1.5 million. Our population in Hazleton during that time grew by 50%. 50%. That's a huge growth for any community. But our tax revenue stayed the same. Imagine having 50% more people and not 1 cent to provide public services to those folks. We also saw gangs moving into our city, which we weren't used to. There were shootings and they were recruiting children 9 and 10 years old. Remember our hospitals, the impact it had on our hospitals. The wait time in the Hazleton area General Hospital at the time might be like 20 minutes, usually. Now people were waiting 7, 8, 9 hours. People were using the emergency room for primary health care. When this kind of stuff happens, the quality of life in a small town changes. It's not the same. It's not like a big city where you can't see the difference. I remember we arrested some guy who was in the country illegally for selling crack cocaine on a playground I grew up on. It took our detectives 5 hours to determine who he was. He had 5 Social Security cards. We had no idea who we were dealing with anymore. I had asked Washington for help. They laughed. Nobody came. Nobody would even come around. Final straw for me was May 10th, 2006, a day that I'll never forget. Another young man, 29 years old, named Derek Kishline, father of 3 little children. He was working on his pickup truck when he had some words with Pedro Cabrera, who was the head of the Latin Kings. Cabrera went in his car. By the way, Cabrera, who was in the country illegally, was arrested 6 times in New York and let go of Sanctuary City, ended up in Hazleton. Cabrera went in his car, got a gun, stuck it in Derek's face, shot and killed him. We spent half of our yearly budget in overtime in the police department in catching Cabrera and his buddy. I had to sit with Mr. and Mrs. Kishline when they asked me, why was this man still in the country? Why is our son gone? Why is the father of our grandchildren gone forever? And this man was still here. I had enough. Enough was enough. If the federal government wasn't going to do something, I was. I created the first law in the country at the time dealing with illegal immigration. I was sued immediately the next day by the ACLU. Oh, I made English the official language of Hazleton as well, which they sued. I was sued the next day by the ACLU, and media trucks literally came from all over the world. I got to City Hall, and I couldn't even get into the parking lot. I was wondering what happened. I didn't realize it was me that happened. And I picked up the USA Today, and there was a story talking about what we did in Hazleton, and there was a law professor from the University of Missouri named Professor Chris Kobach. He had said, the mayor has every right to do what he's doing. The law is on his side. That was the first time I heard anybody actually say I could do what I was doing. I had told my secretary, I said, I don't know who this guy is, but please try to get him on the phone. And by chance she did. She said, Professor Kobach's on the phone, and Chris answered, and I told him who I was. He said, what took you so long? Chris came on, and our journey began. We fought this all the way to the Supreme Court. And Arizona had followed, Fremont, Nebraska, and the story goes on and on. So the reason we're here, obvious, is because the federal government has failed us. Because the American people can do something that the federal government can't. We can do it better, you can do it faster, and you can do it stronger. And we're not going to stop. I realize one vote doesn't make a difference in Washington. It's you, the American people, that will make the difference. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Lou. Thank you for that. Mary Ann Mendoza.
Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. My fight in all of this started May 12, 2014. I woke up at about 2:45 in the morning by a phone call from Afghanistan. One of my son's fellow officers was also Air National Guard, and he was deployed there. And he told me, Ma, Brandon's been in a really bad accident. And I hung up the phone because it woke me up, and I kept trying to call Brandon's phone, and he wasn't answering. And the next thing I know, Mesa Police Department was knocking on my door and had to take me to the hospital. With my very large family and Brandon's very large friend base, I was amazed on the way to the hospital that I couldn't think of one person to call because my world had just exploded. I mean, I couldn't even believe that I was heading to the hospital. A repeat illegal alien criminal had been allowed to stay in our country after committing multiple crimes, got a slap on the wrist,
that day he was drinking all day and he was doing meth. He ended up on the freeways in Phoenix and drove over 35 miles the wrong way before slamming head-on into my son on his way home from work. This illegal alien was going over 100 miles an hour when he slammed into my son. I arrived at the hospital. My son was in surgery, and about 20 minutes after I arrived at the hospital, he died. So thank God Brandon and I had the type of relationship that we said, I love you, and we hugged each other every time we parted. And I knew that my son knew I loved him, but I also knew that I needed to pick up the fight, and I needed to fight for him and his memory. So that's where it started. I ended up writing 2 letters to President Obama with no response. And the next time I got a phone call from anybody political was from Donald J. Trump when he was running for president in 2015. And he asked me to attend the rally in Phoenix, and I gladly accepted and stood by this man. And President Trump is who gave angel families the platform that we have today. We are still ignored by politicians on the left. We are still ignored by liberal media. They will not utter the word angel family. They will not utter the word angel mom. They will not utter the word an American citizen was killed by an illegal alien. It's as if they just want to act like we don't exist. And thank God for President Trump bringing this to light. So we have formed angel families. Our website is angelfamilies.com. Every one of these wristbands on my arm represents a child who was killed by an illegal alien. I could fill up both arms and still probably fill all of your arms here in this audience with wristbands to represent every American citizen who's been killed by an illegal alien. In 2015, the Association of Sheriff's Association came out with a figure of 25 Americans are killed a day by illegal aliens. And I have taken that figure and cut it in half and used 12 to come up with a figure of 4,300 Americans are killed every year by illegal aliens. I have received such backlash, but let me just tell you a few things that is so misleading in the statistics that our country is able to keep. Number one, the police reports do not include immigration status in them. As we know, the 1070 in Arizona was overturned. They can't ask immigration status. I've got angel moms in Tennessee and in Texas who repeatedly send me police reports of illegal aliens who've killed an American and their race is written down as white. So they're doing this on purpose to keep these statistics from us and to keep us informed, and that's what Steve and I do. On a daily basis, we bring these statistics to you to remind you every day, the left, liberal, they're all lying to you. And this is a national security problem in our country. And this wall is needed all along our southern border. Arizona has normative fencing and barbed wire fencing. That's it. 4 strands of barbed wire, over 300 miles of that is what is our secure border in Arizona. And I just want to talk to you real quickly. These detention centers and all the attention some of these liberal politicians have been bringing by doing little trips down there and screaming and yelling and blaming Trump. They were told for months that this was happening, and they claimed it was a manufactured crisis. They finally show up at the border at this fevered pitch that we're at now, and the overcrowdedness and the overwhelmingness that our Border Patrol agents are facing. And they're screaming that these children are sleeping on the floor, and Border Patrol goes to order more beds to accommodate this invasion. And then these liberal politicians call to boycott the company that Border Patrol is buying the beds from. This is hypocrisy at its finest. They do not want to solve the problem. They want this to continue to have a reason to scream and yell and impeach our president. And I, for one, will not stand for it because he's the only politician. Well, he's not a politician. He's an American patriot. And he's brought this to our attention and given us a platform. So thank you for being here. Keep donating so we can continue making you guys proud and building more wall. And let's protect America and make it safer.
Thank you, Marianne. And Ron and Marianne, we're all very, very sorry for your loss. Thank you. Lou, can you tell our audience a little bit about the reaction of the Hazleton original 25,000 residents when this went down politically? Like, you were mayor, there was a lot of hoopla over what was going on. your population grew to 37.5, as you said, up by 50%. But what was your level of support amongst the original 25,000 people that were there?
Yeah, it's very interesting because the national media immediately labeled me a racist, a bigot. The headlines, every story, I could have wrote the story before they even picked up their pen, what they were going to say, that we were chasing immigrants out of Hazleton. And, in the beginning, because, I wasn't thinking outside of our border, I would say illegal immigrant. By the second paragraph in the print media, the word illegal was left out. And my message became anti-immigrant. So I began using illegal alien because they couldn't twist my words. And what they said is that immigrants were leaving Hazleton. I was chasing Hispanics out of Hazleton. And what I would tell the media and the people that were there, so Hazleton's Latino population has grown every year since I introduced that ordinance back in 2006. Why would Latinos move to a city if they weren't welcome? Why would they want to live there with their families? And I knew the story was wrong. When I ran for my third term as mayor, in a city that was now nearly 50% Latino, I should have been a poster child for we're going to get him. I won with 90% of the vote. Which defies this whole narrative that if you stand up against illegal immigration, you're going to lose support of Latinos, which is another story, John, on why the weak Congress doesn't do anything about illegal immigration, because all they're doing, I used to say, I don't know why Washington won't fix this problem. I think the Democrats want the votes and the Republicans want the cheap labor, and then I was wrong. They both wanted the votes. But the reaction in Hazleton wasn't what you would expect. It was the people there understood that I was standing up for immigrants, legal immigrants, those that wanted a better education, they wanted for their children, they wanted a better job, they wanted a better opportunity. But you will never see that in print. So I had a lot of support back home within my community. It was the outside media and the people who came in that did the protesting.
Thank you, Lou. Ron, you lost a son.
I did.
You're certainly a man of great compassion, having gone through what you did. When AOC says that we lack compassion at the border for children and for mothers, what is your response to that, Steve?
Every day, right here in the Rio Grande sector, we have Border Patrol agents out in boats or even from the shore that are saving the lives of these illegal immigrants coming across the river. They're yanking the kids out of the water. They're yanking adults out of the water. I think it was a lack of empathy is what the chairman called it in that committee the other day. I know a lot of these Border Patrol agents. I've met them and talked to them personally. Lack of empathy is the very last thing that you see from these Border Patrol agents. They are so overwhelmed and they are so overworked, but yet they're out there saving the lives of these illegal aliens. They're putting their own lives at risk, and they're not thinking twice about it. So AOC she can come talk to me about that. I'll introduce her to some of these Border Patrol agents that are saving lives. I'll also let her talk to some of the Border Patrol agents that have talked to us on We Build the Wall. Sheriff Clark knows, Mary Ann knows firsthand. They thank us for what you guys did here. And again, it's you guys that did this. You donated to it. All we did was facilitate it. She needs to talk to the Border Patrols that they say, thank you for what you've done. Thank you. Because you know what? They have this wall, and now we've shut down between 1,000 and 5,000 illegal entries every week. Right here at this section of the border.
Thank you, Steve. Sheriff Clark, when law enforcement is faced and Border Patrol agents are faced with the New York Times running an op-ed a couple weeks ago on a Sunday from someone saying that those protecting our border, agents of the U.S. government, that they should be what you call doxxed, their phone numbers, their addresses given out publicly in order to shame them for doing their job and protecting America's borders. As a law enforcement agent yourself, how did you react to that, Sheriff Clark?
Straight up cop hating, that's what it is. That's what the New York Times is. That's what the Washington Post is. That's what CNN is, MSNBC, the entire Democrat Party across America. Straight up cop haters. Now let me back up a minute. Something that was said in terms of the Democrats saying that they care about the kids. The Democrats don't give a damn about kids. If the Democrats cared about kids, it would start by protecting the unborn in the womb. And the senseless slaughter that goes on. Democrats don't care about black people. If Democrats cared about black people, they would support school choice that gives poor, struggling black families a chance to see their child fully developed in a qualified school, but they're shackled to these failing schools because of the Democrats' lack of support for school choice. The Democrats don't care about people. The Democrats only care about political power. Now, I find it unconscionable that any mayor, that any police chief, that any sheriff in a sanctuary city could put their men and women in uniform in harm's way on the front lines and not give them the full support and the resources they need to get this dangerous job done. And the same goes for our federal brothers and sisters at ICE and at the Border Patrol. The same thing goes there. Now, I often get asked, Sheriff, I do a lot of radio and TV interviews, and I get asked, what do we need to do first in terms of beginning to fix this broken immigration system? And I say, seal the border. Then they say, well, what should we do next? And I said, seal the border. Well, then what should we do after that, Sheriff? And I said, seal the damn border, because the border is not sealed. And time after time, we heard it mentioned earlier, a twice-deported man, illegal alien in Iowa, stabbed a mother and killed her 2 children. Twice deported. That means this border is not sealed. And I keep reminding people, I think it's neat that ICE is going out and doing these raids of people who've been ordered deported. But guess what, folks? Until we effectively seal this border, and the only person in Washington, D.C. that understands that is Donald Trump, those people are coming back. It is a drain on federal law enforcement resources. So, but for your help, and but for your generosity in helping with We Build the Wall, we cannot get this done without the help of the American people. And I know the American people. I've been all across this country, and I've met a lot of you. I know what's in your heart. You just want what's best for your country, your community, and your family. That's all you want, and that's for everybody in your community. That's there legally and lawfully, and it's going to abide by the rules, the laws. That's all you want. It's pretty simple. Well, this thing's in the political realm now in Washington, D.C. Nothing gets done in Washington, D.C. The only reason we were able to get this done in the short period of time we did at the cost is because we got the government out of the way. It is amazing what you can do when you get government out of the way. We're not going to stop. We are not going to be denied, but we need your help. We need you to dig down deep. And I know the generosity of the American people. You always step forward in times of crisis, like with hurricanes and floods and wildfires. You dig down into your pockets. You give your time to donate to help other Americans. That's what we're doing here. This is Americans helping Americans. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. You know, we all give a lot of money to a lot of different people that ask and a lot of different causes. Sometimes you never know where it goes. But in this instance, WeBuildTheWall.us, it goes right there. You can see it. Very different. Thank you, Sheriff. Marianne, you're one that many people reach out to, other angel moms and dads in a similar situation. I know you've given many of them counsel and comfort, and thank you for that. Marianne, 2 days ago, you got banned from Twitter for voicing your views on illegal immigration. Having gone through your tragedy and helped so many people, why are you being censored by the left for telling the truth?
Good question.
but it's pretty obvious. You know, I read an article not long ago that George Soros had planned to silence all conservative people on social media before the 2020 elections. I believe he's got a big part in all of this. But I am my son's voice, and I will never be silenced. And it's actually a week ago today that I was suspended on Twitter for 6 tweets. I use the words illegal alien in every one of my tweets when I'm talking about this. I put it in capital letters in every one of my tweets. I have also started using in the last 4 or 5 months hashtag blood on your hands when I'm referring to politicians who will not do anything to solve the problem at our border, who encourage sanctuary policies, and I let them know that they have blood on their hands for the death of every innocent American at the hands of an illegal that they're protecting. So, and some of my tweets that they pointed out that needed to be deleted didn't have either of those words, either of those phrases in them. They won't communicate with me to tell me exactly what was wrong. So they're ignoring my emails to them to get clarification. There's no phone number that you can call to talk to a live person at Twitter. So I think probably the next time Twitter is going to be hearing from me is through an attorney, because I am going to sue them. They're not going to force me.
Good for you.
They're not going to force me to use some alternative social media platform because they've decided I'm too dangerous for the liberal
That's
view.
exactly what they've done.
And I'm not going to let them do that to me. I don't want to go to Parler. I've got an account on Parler, but I've worked very hard to get my followers on Twitter. And angelfamilies.com is our website. And I am tweeting currently at Angel Families. That is another Twitter account of mine. I do tweet at Angel Moms also. So follow me on there. We do have a Facebook page. And I'm sure Twitter is going to get pretty, clear that it's me on Angel Families because I'm saying my same statements and my same message. But the other thing that I want to talk about real quickly, if I can.
Yes.
I was named to the advisory board for Women for Trump a few weeks ago. And I wanted to talk about, Sheriff Clark and I had a conversation the last time we were down here about the silent majority can be silent no more. And that has really resonated with me, that conversation that we had. And this is a message that Women for Trump is going to be bringing out to women. You cannot be silent anymore. You can't go up to somebody that you see in public wearing a Make America Great hat and whisper to them, I support him too. We have got to stand up for this man who is standing up for us. We've got to give him the support. You and I have every right to say what we want, just like the left does. And just because it doesn't agree with their policies doesn't mean that we have to shut up. And so we have got to become strong, and we have got to voice our opinions, and we have got to stand up for our president and for our country.
Hear, hear. Because it is the process of intimidation they want. My son plays high school baseball at an elite level, and we went around for the last 2 months with him in Georgia and Florida playing in various tournaments. And when I would go, I would have on my Make America Great Again hat and my Trump shirt, because I don't really care what anybody says. There must have been at least 100, this is no exaggeration, people that would come up to me, various parents or whatever, and said, hey, I'm for him too. But they whisper it like they're afraid. And it would be like, great, why don't you join the team? We'd love to have you. They'd be like, shh, don't tell anybody, here's my card. So that's part of the intimidation. Sheriff, you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, you see these news stories of Trump supporters chased out of restaurants. You hear these stories about cops being refused service in some restaurants in these sanctuary cities. And, I have several Trump hats that I wear proudly wherever I want to go. And I was living out in Washington, D.C. area for the last 18 months. And I wore that hat a lot. And I'd walk down the streets of the federal district daring, hoping somebody would come up, start screaming at me or knock my hat off my head or whatever, because they would have got a lot different response than me just simply leaving the restaurant or me turning the other cheek. All right? When I wear that MAGA hat and when I wear that Trump hat, folks, that is a political statement. And I'm not going to have anybody deny me my First Amendment right to participate in the political process. It's not going to happen. Now, I understand I'm a little bigger than most people. I keep in pretty good shape. But I'll tell you what, there's other things that are just as effective that you can do. I mean, you're not entitled to service in a restaurant. That's okay. But some things are happening inside that restaurant that aren't real cool. All right? But you got to figure out what your physical capability and think. Always think first. I've already thought this through, if you can't tell. What would I do if X? What would I do if Y? But you got to think about it ahead of time. But I'll tell you what. My ancestors came over to this country in the hulls of ships as slaves. And they fought. And they shed blood that one day future generations of black people could participate in the United States Constitution. And it finally happened. And if you think for 1 second I'm going to allow any idiot to deny me all the rights and privileges afforded under the Constitution of the United States, including political participation, you would be wrong.
Steve?
You know, the left right now is in a process, and that process is the systematic dismantling of our Constitution. They're out there trying to convince everyone that socialism is what's best for our country. 50 years ago, the word socialist was a dirty word. We had, the 40s and 50s, we had, congressional hearings on socialism and communism. People were scared of it. Well, unfortunately, now we have people that are indoctrinating our children and telling us that socialism is the best way to go. Well, and Sheriff Clark and I have talked, and Steve Bannon and I have talked, and Mary Ann and I have talked. I've decided that this fight that I have, and the fight for American citizens, and to fight to keep illegal aliens from killing American citizens, and to keep building this wall, I'm going to take the fight to the next level. I'm going to be running in Arizona CD3 against Raul Grijalva. We're going to put an angel family in Congress.
Hey, that's what we need, is everybody to rise up and run everywhere and take the fight right to them the way Steve is. Steve, great job. We look forward to your campaign and for a great success. Let's open it up for questions for our esteemed panel. Don't be shy. This is West Texas. No, we're in New Mexico, right?
Hello, my name is Mary Yoli Moore. I am the public relations and press officer for Christian television station KSE TV Channel 38. Very quickly, once upon a time I heard President Bush say, welcome to the New World Order. I lived in Europe for 18 years. I belong to the French club here in El Paso. I belong to the German club here in El Paso. When I'm around the French club and the German club, I feel semi-normal because they seem to know what the real problem is in the United States. They speak about why do not the American citizens see that the New World Order globalists are doing the same thing that they are doing in Europe. They speak about how socialism in Europe, that they're better, normal citizens are very, very poor, where all illegal aliens that are there because of no borders, living rich, have cars, have homes, have everything. So after I leave the French club and the German American, I say to myself, I've been thinking about this for the last 25 years. I've been seeing the United States, came back to the United States in 1993. And I would like to ask you all, the panel, why does the normal, everyday, I know President Trump speaks about it. For example, George Soros, he has been restricted in Hungary, he's Hungarian. And then not only that, President Trump has inspired a lot of people. He's inspired Bolsonaro, the president of Brazil. He's inspired Salvini, the president of Italy. He's inspired Boris Johnson, the new PM.
Can you
and my
do us a
question
favor?
to you is,
just tighten your question up
why
just
do you not
a little bit.
talk more about the real problem? Where is the real evil coming from? They are trying to destroy
Your question
our
is
culture.
where is the real evil emanating from? Thank
Exactly.
you. You want to start, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Congressman, Mr. Senator?
Sure. You know, I think there's a lot of finger pointing to go around. You know, if you look at the media, the way they treated this president from the very first time he came down the escalator, it didn't matter, and it became every day. And then, you know, and then the politicians piled on, the Democrats in Washington, in Congress, every day. And it got to the point now where it's common that we don't know what President Trump did wrong today, but don't worry about it, because they're going to find something else to accuse him tomorrow, and they'll get over it, and they'll go to the next day and the next day and the next day. They have forgotten about the American people. You no longer matter to them. You no longer matter. There is a Trump derangement going on right now between the national media and the people in Congress. They don't care about infrastructure. They don't care about health care. They care about getting control of Congress so that they can control your life. There's a lot of finger pointing going on, but this wall is more than a small section. This wall is an example that the American people have had enough. And this is your government and your country, and you send those folks to Washington, and you can tell them when the hell they got to go home.
Marianne?
Well, and our politicians are really aiding and abetting these illegals coming over our border. They aren't fixing the problem. They are letting them know that they're going to be protected once they get here. They're letting them know that they're going to be more important to them than you or I will be. So they're aiding and abetting. But one thing I do want to say, don't forget all of the hundreds of thousands of your fellow Americans who are affected. They aren't killed by illegal aliens, but they are raped, they are assaulted, they're affected with the hit and run, they've had identity theft. All of these things are affecting hundreds of thousands of Americans every year. It's not just the Angel families and the victims who have been killed or murdered. It is a lot of Americans. They are the silent majority as far as this whole scenario is concerned. Politicians were talking years ago about bringing illegal aliens out of the shadows and give them a voice. Guess what? They've shoved American victims into the shadows, and I'm sick of us not having a voice, and by damn, we're going to have a voice.
Steve?
You asked where the real evil comes from. Well, the real evil comes from the people that are trying to dismantle our Constitution that we've talked about. The ones that are trying to dismantle our national monuments because they're racist. The ones that are trying to say that saying the Pledge of Allegiance and including God is racist. Our flag is racist. These people are trying to dismantle our country and our Constitution. And by God, I'm not going to sit back and watch it happen. I'm not going to sit and wait for it to happen. I'm going to make sure it doesn't happen. You asked where the real evil comes from? Look at the left that says it's okay to have a post-term abortion. It's infanticide. They call us Nazis. They call the Republicans Nazis. Well, good Lord, what's infanticide? They're giving these people the right to kill children. It's murder. But yet, they're dancing all over the Constitution. They're twisting it. They're turning it. And they're using it against us. That's not the way our Constitution was written. And I'm never going to believe that that's what our founding fathers had in mind.
Thank you, Steve. All right, we've got time for one more question. We're a little short on time, sir. If you could ask a question and limit your statement, we'd be very grateful. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Ray Rivera. Sheriff Clark, with that hat, you need to come to El Paso. We need you here. Yeah. And the congressman, the ex-wife got the house up in Marshall's Creek. I got the house out here in El Paso. So I just wanted to give a shout out for that part of Pennsylvania.
All right, we've got one more. Okay, one more.
Well, since he started out with just positive things, I need just positive, no question here. Okay, first of all, my hat. My son in Tampa, Florida, he says, "Hey, Mom, a bunch of us are going out in our boats on, can I borrow your hat?" I said, "Yeah, but don't lose it." So when he came back, I said, "Well, how'd it go with the hat?" He says, "Everybody there was wearing a Trump hat." So these are 50-year-old men, business owners, Tampa, Florida. They're out there in their boats having a good time. They're all Trump supporters. Okay, wait a minute, one more. Okay, and then my son-in-law up in North Carolina, on the day of Trump's inauguration, he was in a restaurant eating lunch, and they wouldn't turn the TV onto the inauguration. And he said, "Hey, can you change the channel?" And she said, No. Well, he said, "Well, I'm going to go to a different restaurant." And about 2 other tables said, "Well, we're leaving too." She changed the channel.
Nice.
All right, thank you very much. I want to thank our panel again. Sheriff David Clark, America's Sheriff. Steve Ronnebeck, thank you, Steve. Former Congressman Lou Barletta, thank you, Lou. Marianne, thank you. Marianne Mendoza, thank you. Thank you all.
The Symposium at the Wall, sponsored by We Build the Wall, Numbers USA, Citizens of the American Republic, Black Americans for a Better Future, Angel Families, Citizens United, and Human Events. We'll return to the Symposium at the Wall after this short break.
January 22nd, 2015, Grant was working the overnight shift at Quick Trip in Mesa. Man came in, wanted to buy a pack of cigarettes, dumped a jar of change out on the counter. Grant went to start counting the change. Evidently, Grant wasn't counting the change fast enough. This man said, "What, you're not going to give me my cigarettes?" Grant says, "Hey, I have to count your change." This man pulled a gun. Grant did everything he was supposed to do. He went ahead and handed over the cigarettes. This man then shot Grant point blank in the face. He walked around the counter, walked over Grant's dead body, picked up 2 more packs of cigarettes, and walked back over Grant's dead body and just walked out of the store. Later that day, we found out that this man was an illegal immigrant. He had previously been charged with sexual assault and a home invasion. We hear about this being a manufactured crisis. It's not manufactured. My son's death wasn't manufactured. The biggest misconception that people have about border security, I think, is that we don't need it. Grant's death was preventable. If we had had a wall or a better barrier between the 2 countries, the man that killed my son probably wouldn't be here. Deportation probably wouldn't have stopped him because he would have just crossed illegally again. The only way we're going to stop this is once we deport the criminals, we got to make sure that they're not going to be able to get back. People want this wall. They want so badly for somebody to say, we're going to do something about it. And you can just feel it, that they've been wanting this for a long time. And we can't wait anymore. We're on schedule to have 1 million people cross our borders illegally this year. Our sustainable population in our country cannot afford this. Our social services can't afford this. Our law enforcement can't afford this. Our American citizens cannot afford to keep paying this bill. Our team, we've all been delving into this for years. We know what we need to get done. We've actually gone to the border. We've actually spent time with victims and their families. And by the grace of God, we're going to be able to get this done. We need your help. We need you to get your friends and your family to start understanding why we're fighting. We're fighting for our children, and we're fighting for your children. We don't want this to happen to any one of you. The destruction in my family alone, I could never wish that on any one of you. This is what I'm fighting for, so that nobody else has to go through what I've gone through. To see it come to fruition for me is going to be a form of closure for me. I can see myself walking up to the wall. That first post or stake or whatever it is. I know Grant's going to be with me. I know that he's going to say, "Good job, Dad." I know Grant's going to be with me that day.
We return to the Symposium at the Wall, Cartels, Trafficking, and Asylum.
Welcome back to the Symposium at the Wall. This next panel, I'm going to turn to our introducer, who's none other than the founder and president of We Build the Wall, the one and only Brian Kolfage.
Thank you all for coming out here and bearing with us in this extreme heat. I really appreciate it. I have a tall order to introduce you these three men who many people might not know who they are, but behind the scenes, each one was vital to getting where we are today. And We Build the Wall is not just one person. It's just not me. We're a team, and it took a team effort, a very large team effort to get it done. Everyone might know Chris Kobach. Chris is the general counsel for We Build the Wall. He wrote up me a novel of bullet points for what he does, but I'm going to wade through like 1,000 of them. He is the former Secretary of State for Kansas. He's also a former professor of law. Chris is also the advisor, a former immigration advisor to Attorney General John Ashcroft. Chris has been vital with cutting through all the red tape, with the bureaucratic process of us getting this wall built. He's been with us on the ground. He went to Harvard, and surprisingly, this Harvard graduate is down here getting his boots dirty, so let's give him all a round of applause for Chris. Thank you. Next up is John Moran. John was one of the first guys I met after I raised about $20 million, and I was sitting in Steve Bannon's house in Washington, D.C., and John showed up out of nowhere with, what was it, a 20-page, almost like college essay of how to build this wall, down down to every single penny of the cost of where the concrete was going to be mined, the steel, everything. And it blew our mind. We're like, wow, this guy, we need him on our team. And we've never seen, it was basically a white paper on how to build a wall. And no one has ever went in this great of detail. And this was the first day that we met John. John's really modest. The paper he gave me is very modest, but he's also been vital for getting this done. He's a businessman and an industrialist. He invested in energy production and logistics, and also the aerospace industry. And I mean, those three things, they don't really make up what John does, but he knows a lot of information about construction and getting the job done. And you know, the construction aspect of this wall, we referred everything to John. John would go over our plans for this, ensure everything was up to par. We knew Tommy Fisher was doing a great job, but we were representing the people, and we had to ensure that the money we were spending was going to a good product and everything was in line, since that we are a nonprofit. So thank you, John, for everything you've done. General Spalding. I met General Spalding the same time that I met John Moran, and he's a fellow Air Force veteran, only he was a lot higher ranked than myself. He was a general. And what I knew about General Spalding is that he was Trump's right-hand man to China, and very modest as well. This guy sits at the table and brings a ton of knowledge and information on the political atmosphere of dealing with the government, dealing with politics, and he helped us cut through a lot of red tape and guide us to the correct path to get this wall done ultimately. He retired after 22 years in the Air Force as a general. He was a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute, and he focused on national security and rebuilding the country. And thank you all. Thank you all for everything you've done. We couldn't have done this without you. You guys have been the silent force and the people who, you know, I'm just one guy. You guys are entrenched in D.C., entrenched in politics, entrenched in business and law, and they are the experts in all those fields, the highest that you can go. And we couldn't have got this wall built without them. So thank you guys all. I really appreciate everything you've done with us.
Thank you, Chris.
And now I'm going to give it up to them. They're going to go over everything about what the process was and
national security.
There we go.
All right. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it, Brian. So the topic of this panel on the symposium is the national security aspects of what We Build the Wall does. And I'm going to moderate and let these two gentlemen, General Spalding and John, do most of the talking here. But let me turn it over to each of them to just give us some opening thoughts on how this wall and border walls generally play into the national security of the United States, and then we'll start drilling down on some specific topics. So, General Spalding, why don't you go ahead and give us your thoughts first?
Thanks, Chris. So, first of all, I'd like to talk a little bit how I got involved. I saw the campaign for Build, when Brian was raising money for building the wall back when we thought we could give it to the government and they would build it. Of course, we found out that we couldn't do that. But I was one of the first donators to that effort because I really believed in my heart that, in a lot of ways, government can't solve all the problems for us. And if you look at the steel and concrete behind you, you can draw a direct line to the men that sat in Valley Forge and then fought for our freedoms. We are a country that has always, from the very beginning, stood up for our own freedoms and fought for them. And so I was really inspired by Brian's story, his sacrifice in his personal life. And as an airman, I was most proud to join him in this fight. And so it was very easy for me to decide to come on board and help in any way I could. And one of the things that I have been focused on in the last 6 years is trying to understand a lot of the challenges we have in national security in our country that aren't currently well understood. If you look that direction, not the direction of the hall, if you look that direction, there's a railroad. And if you look and watch, there's going to be cars going around across that railroad every single day. And what I was looking at in 2014 and 2015 and 2016 in the Pentagon was trying to understand what had gone wrong in the country in a way that had really set us down a path to not being the country that I had grown up in. And what I began to understand is, we had built this tremendous military, this great Air Force, this great Army, this great Navy. We had all of these people working in the Pentagon ostensibly to protect our national security. Yet what was happening is our security was being eroded from within. And and we're going to talk a little bit about, actually a lot about the things that John and I have talked about, quite frankly, for the last year. But just in the wall itself, if you look at what Congress did back in 2000 in creating a law that had the military focus on human trafficking to the point where every single military member was required to spend 2 hours every single year studying what human trafficking was. Before that time, I really had no understanding of the magnitude of human trafficking around the world, and it really it got me aware of the problem. And so I've spent, then essentially 18 years, every single year, really being reminded of how big a problem this is, not just in terms of, what you typically understand, but all of the tremendous harm that happens to women, children, and others in human trafficking. And what I came to understand that while we were being taught about human trafficking in a very focused way, the bigger problem, the massive problem, the problem that was going completely unprotected from a national security perspective was our southern border. And I really began to understand the nexus of human trafficking and the fentanyl trade, and understanding, as those all the effort that caused those train rail cars to go across the bridge every single day. You can hear them now. You hear that horn in the background. That same train, that same traffic was in a lot of ways, and I'm going to explain it in a little bit, in a lot of ways responsible for the deaths in our society. So we have, in 1999, we had 8,000 deaths reported nationwide for overdose. That's reported on the National Institute of Health website. If you go in 2017, we had 47,000 deaths in overdose. And if you remember, there's been a lot of lawsuits going towards the main opioid producers in the country. But that only accounts for 17,000 of those 47,000 deaths. The other 30,000 of those deaths come from fentanyl. And fentanyl comes from one place, China. Most of it comes across the southern border. So not only were those trains demonstrating the loss of 78,000 factories since China entered the WTO, the loss of 3.5 million jobs just in manufacturing since China entered the WTO, it represented the collapse of those communities, not only because they didn't have jobs, but because their communities had been flooded with drugs, quite frankly, that are killing them, and are killing them at a rate that we haven't seen in this country since the Vietnam War.
I think where I could follow up to that, General, is you were all just hearing that train whistle. I think that whistle should really be a noise that wakes us up. It represents to me basically the gutting of our country. As a little boy, I used to go with my father throughout Pennsylvania, and the year was 1975, and we were in a very serious crisis at that time. We had numerous manufacturing plants closing. It affected me to this day, and has driven me to a pathway in my life that I want to find a way to reindustrialize America. I look at what has happened to where I live in central Pennsylvania, one small town after another that used to be Santa's workshops. They used to have family-sustaining jobs. They had people that had pride. They had communities that were not failing with infrastructure that was crumbling, and they did not have drugs in those communities that were wiping out our young people and destroying our culture. We also, at that time, put the American people first. And what we've had for the last 40 plus years is the driven profit motive, which broke the social covenant motive in our culture. They have put profits ahead of people. They have put drugs and trafficking of illegal drugs ahead of our people. When I look at 2001, and we go into Afghanistan, and we have, Afghanistan heroin production was 100 metric tons a year. Last year, it was 1,800 metric tons. It was grown and harvested in front of our troops. Our troops have been put at a disadvantage, a terrible disadvantage there. They're not allowed to actively engage the Taliban. They could be 400 clicks out, fully armed, and unless they attack our troops first, we can't attack them. Those drugs are ultimately harvested in the open, refined in the open, and shipped through Mexico, and then they're brought in and they're killing 60 to 70,000 Americans a year. We spent $61 billion in Afghanistan last year. That's enough money to train and educate over 200,000 young Americans with STEM education. We've had an education system in this country that has intentionally dumbed down millions of our young people. We've had a situation where these drugs are so rampant that when you walk through small town America, it's almost like watching a Walking Dead movie, because these people have they're just almost turned into zombies. They have no opportunity, they have no money. And all of this has been brought to you through Wall Street. Wall Street has been directly investing trillions of dollars of our retirement funds into China so they can build their large multi-million population center cities. They can build an industrial base that once was ours with our money and with our assets. I've watched my entire life the dismantling, the destruction of our industrial base. I've watched how it was turned into scrap and sent over on 100,000-ton ships, when they turned it into bridges that make our San Francisco Golden Gate Bridge look small. And all of this with the stamp and seal of Wall Street and our Congress and our Senate and our presidents. You look at the political environment today in this country, and you say to yourself, it's absolutely amazing of what happened to the American people. We have a political theater being played out in front of the American people, with very divisive issues being put out in front of us intentionally, I believe. One of the oldest ones, and I know we've talked and I've heard people talk about it here today with great conviction, is abortion. You believe in it or you don't, and that's intentional, folks. They want you to be separated. They want us to be divided. Open borders have been one for many years. And once again, either you believe in open borders or you believe we should have a wall. Very divisive again. When you look at one of the newest ones today, climate change, for instance, either you believe in it or you believe it's a hoax. Folks, these are designed to intentionally divide us, while all along our country continues to be gutted. So I talked a little bit, maybe too long here. I'll probably turn it back to Chris.
You're all right. Good. Well, I want to thank you. I want to drill down a little bit on one of the things that we all agree is a huge threat, but unfortunately the mainstream media doesn't talk about it that much, and that is that terrorists don't just come in like the 9/11 hijackers did, with relatively clean records through a port of entry. Terrorists also come in across our unguarded borders. And when I was at the Department of Justice from 01 to 03, I was there during 9/11, and we obviously rapidly expanded federal prosecutions for terrorism, and that became a new priority for the FBI and for the Department of Justice. Well, a higher priority. It was already one. But when I left the Department of Justice in 2003, I quickly looked at how many cases had already reached a federal prosecution, so they were public at that point, of terrorists who had come in across the southern border. And the number was already half a dozen cases were already to the prosecution stage. Now, for every case that's at the prosecution stage, there are cases where it's not public yet, but the FBI is building a case, or where we have some information about a terrorist in the United States, and it's not yet, they haven't yet started assembling the evidence for prosecution. So that 6 represented probably more than 20 cases already, and that was it just right after 9/11. And then since then, we have had year after year where a disturbing pattern has emerged where people will come to the United States from terrorist haven countries, places like Somalia, places like Libya, and they will not come to the United States through a port of entry coming in through an airport on the East Coast. They will fly to Mexico, and then they will hire a coyote to bring them to the southern border and then sneak them across the border. So the question is, why are they coming? Why would you do that? If you want to come to the United States, get a visa, come in legally. But instead, they choose to go a very circuitous route to come in illegally, and the numbers just keep thousands upon thousands of people from these terrorist haven countries are coming in this way. Now, obviously, they're not all terrorists, but it stands to reason that a significantly higher percentage of people from those countries are likely to be involved in terrorism than, say, someone coming from Mexico. So the point is that there's been a disturbing trend. I have no doubt that the number of terrorists or people working for terrorist organizations who have come across the southern border illegally is now probably in the hundreds, and there are many that we probably don't even know about. And I am certain there are many we do know about and that our intelligence agencies are tracking. But here's a question I want to throw to the panel. So it's bad enough that the terrorists can just get in themselves and then start operating, whether it be raising money for a terrorist organization, whether it be coordinating a future attack. But there's also this risk, which I think should keep all of us awake at night, or at least it should be present in our minds, and it certainly is something scary enough to keep me awake at night, and that is a dirty bomb. A dirty bomb can be as small as a suitcase, probably weigh 50 or 70 pounds, and what it is, and I'll let the general talk more about it, but it's basically a conventional explosive that when it detonates, it sends deadly chemical agents into the air, and those agents drift, and you can end up killing hundreds of thousands, maybe even more than 1 million people with one relatively small bomb. Now, before we built this wall, well, there's still there. There's a parking lot on the Mexican side. You've all seen it if you've looked through the gaps in the wall here. And then there's a parking lot on the American side. All you had to do before We Build the Wall came in was drive a vehicle up on the Mexican side, walk 5 paces with your suitcase dirty bomb, put it in the trunk of a vehicle on the American side, and drive off. And there was nobody stopping you at all. We now have prevented that here. But I can tell you, and I'm not going to say exactly where, that within 50 miles of where we are right now, there are several places where there's a gravel road on the Mexican side, there's a gravel road parallel to it on the American side, and those 2 gravel roads are separated by a few strands of barbed wire. And it's the same situation. A few steps, and you move that suitcase into the United States. This is scary. And if people are routinely coming from these terrorist haven countries to Mexico, they could also come and assemble a dirty bomb and get it into the United States. I'd love your thoughts on that threat.
Yeah, so I think I'm constantly focused on how do we have macro solutions to systemic threats. And you have to define the problem before you can get there. And so the problem of our southern border is not immigration. It's not drugs. The problem on our southern border is we have a semi-failed state on the other side of the border. And so if you look around the world, what we did after the end of the Cold War is we basically changed the structure of the international order. Prior to the beginning of World War II, there was a charter signed by the UK and Washington, D.C. It's called the Atlantic Charter. It's a one-page template for the international order. And what that said is the international order is going to be based on free trade, democratic principles, rule of law, and self-determination. And essentially, that's the world we built after World War II. At the end of the Cold War, when we thought we had fought for the last time to promote our freedoms and democracy was going to reign, and that if we just opened up, democracy could flourish everywhere. Essentially, that became our foreign policy. And it was based on economic theory and social theory. Economic theory says open markets lead to wealth. Social theory, theory of modernization, says wealth leads to democracy. In other words, if we just opened up, that everybody would democratize. The problem is there were so many societies around the world that didn't actually want democracy. They were ruled by despots or totalitarian regimes that wanted to promote their own power. So just like the cartel runs much of Mexico, totalitarian regimes are predominant in many parts of the world. And they use that openness to promote illiberal norms across not just their borders, but other borders. In other words, what we did after the end of the Cold War was walk away from the Atlantic Charter, walk away from national sovereignty as a way to protect our own national interests, and adopt a set of open principles that said we had won. There's nothing else to worry about. What I have been working on the last 5 or 6 years is trying to understand how that is coming back to hurt us. And I kind of mentioned it with the rail car. So let's just look at trade, right? Because trade is something we talk about all the time. We have something, and this gets right to the dirty bomb question, a program that was developed, after 9/11 called the Container Security Initiative, and it requires the pre-inspection of cargo before it even gets to U.S. ports. So, China is a member of the Container Security Initiative. We have 4 inspectors over there to ensure that they comply with the Container Security Initiative. Those 4 inspectors, 2 in Shanghai, 2 in Shenzhen, are not actually allowed to look inside any containers by Chinese law. The Chinese customs officers are fined if they slow down the lading process, and most of the lading is done on the weekends. So what I'm telling you is that everything that gets produced in China gets shipped, and it hardly ever gets inspected. More importantly, for companies that really don't want to have any issues when they get to the port, they seek out ISO 9001 certification. An agency or a company comes and looks at you and certifies you, says your manufacturing process, your logistics process is all up to standard, and you're given ISO 9001 certification. The company that issues half of ISO 9001 certifications is a Chinese state-owned enterprise. And so just in trade alone, we've created this world where we actually don't know what's coming into the country. And I'm not talking about what's driving around the places where we don't have ports of entry. I'm talking about in all our ports of entry. And this is going on all over the country. So that is, the dirty bomb is a threat. There are so many threats that are potentially able to come across the border just because we've taken this very controlled free world and we've basically allowed all of these bad actors to be involved in it.
John?
To follow up with that, the IP theft that also is involved in that ports of entry is shocking. For instance, if you look, all of us are familiar with when we buy a product, it tells you what country it was made in. And you basically see, a tag that will say made in USA, or a tag that would say made in China, or a tag that would say made in Mexico. But what you're seeing is American innovation developing top-notch products, and those products are being pirated and knocked off by companies in China and Mexico. And those are very difficult to determine where those products are being made, because if you look at the product on the back of, say, a product that you buy in a grocery store, it'll say the name of the company, and it will appear to be a U.S. company because it'll have a U.S. address on it, but it was primarily just a marketing company. It's a company that did not make that product. They bought it through a provider in China or Mexico that had stolen the IP for that product. One simple way that we could ensure our IP would be to not only have the tag that says made in China or Mexico, but also have the name of the corporation on that tag that made that product in those countries. So when they come into our ports, you can look at the bill of ladings in those containers and you can determine who made that product and whether or not they had the IP license to make that product. And if they didn't, then that container would be automatically rejected at our border. And I believe that what would be a dream, and I know the General and I have talked about this, a dream of ours would be to turn around a container ship back to China, for instance, because of all the IP theft that we know is prevalent on that container. You know, the General also mentioned, you know, the fact that we aren't allowed to even inspect containers. I think we should have a mandatory process in place where we have our custom agents on these manufacturing plant floors inspecting this product before it's even put onto a container, so that we can guarantee that it's their IP, that the quality is safe for consumption by our American people, and that the load is properly secured and sealed so that it cannot be tampered with along the way, which could, you know, fall into what you said, a suitcase the size, you know, of a Samsonite suitcase that could destroy a whole city. Could not be interjected in that process. So yes, we have a porous border. Thank God we have President Trump that awoken the people of this country. For 40 years, the American people were sound asleep. But while they were sound asleep, there was people behind the walls with knives, and they were slicing throats. President Trump woke up the people, and when they opened up their eyes and wiped the sleep out of their eyes, which they are still doing today, but every day the General and I comment that the American people are waking up, and they're looking around, and they don't know what happened, but they do know one thing: they don't like what they see, and they want America's sovereignty back. They want their safety back in their communities, and they want these wars that we're fighting to end. You know, what shocks me is that we have 30,000 United States troops on South Korea and North Korea's border for nearly 65 years. They're geared up every single day of the week, 24 hours a day, to kill or be killed for someone else's sovereignty. Our men. They're spending their paychecks in South Korea's economy. They're stimulating South Korea's economy. And the true story is the South Koreans don't want us there. Bring them home, put them on our borders, secure our borders, and let them be here with their families and in their own country.
Yeah, I'd just like to address just real quick, the fentanyl issue. So fentanyl is not being cooked up in somebody's trailer in Mexico. This product is being made in highly sophisticated factories in China that were built for the express purpose of manufacturing drugs for the pharmaceutical industry. So you wonder, how is that fentanyl finding its way here? Well, in China, the Chinese Communist Party gets legitimacy by providing jobs to its people. And so it tells the pharmaceutical manufacturers, as long as you don't distribute that fentanyl in China, produce all you want, because we want to keep those people employed. So in essence, they're not pushing this as a deliberate ploy to kill Americans. What they're saying is, we want to deliver the American dream to Chinese people, and we don't care how we get there.
Let me turn the focus a little bit to what We Build the Wall has learned from other countries. The three of us were involved at the very early stages when We Build the Wall got going in January and early February of this year. And it's amazing how far we've come. When you think about this organization,